Did you know that humans are getting shorter? What does bacon and eggs have to do with the CIA successfully overthrowing the government of Guatemala? Which country has a life expectancy of only 14 years old? Learn the stories behind these and so much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description. Which thing do you want to talk about?
The Big Bang, I guess.
Okay, what about it?
So if nothing started the universe, then was there always material to cause a Big Bang, or is the universe eternal in that way?
The universe can be eternal. The matter we see around us wouldn't have existed, but the energy in some way, in some kind of form, could exist eternally.
So energy is eternal, but you don't believe in an eternal God.
No, because there's no evidence of magic or anything like that. The scientific law that
I'm not
energy
saying
can't
it's
be created or destroyed is like, we have that scientific law because it holds true. There's certain things that happen when you add up all the energies of the universe. You don't get zero, like they don't cancel out. And some of that, I believe, has to do with
okay.
the expansion of the universe. So, I mean, laws are not absolute. They are like factual observations that we make, but
Yeah.
they're actually not absolute in that sense, or in any sense necessarily. But I don't know. I'm just kind of saying words at this point. So
Yeah. I think where we would disagree is that I'd say that God created energy and then made it appear through the laws of um, physics and things like that it cannot be created or destroyed. I think that's the only place we disagree.
yeah, but then I would ask you, why do you think that, or what evidence of that do you have?
Um, I don't have a reason as to why God would do it that way, because I'd have to know God's mind. The evidence I have is just through there being creation.
There
I'm not
is
really a
creation.
de debater, yeah, but there is something. So I'd have to know that. I mean, if we didn't exist, then I wouldn't have evidence of it. But everything I see before me, it exists, and I'm aware of it.
Yeah. So in a universe where God doesn't exist, the universe also doesn't exist.
Exactly,
How does that
because
follow?
there'd be nothing to cause. Yeah, there'd be nothing to cause existence to begin with.
Why does existence
There-
need a cause if God doesn't?
Because in the same way you have faith that everything is eternal, like energy, I have faith that God is eternal
I don't have faith
through.
in that. We have that is in evidence. Well,
But
it being
so you can prove
eternal
it.
isn't exactly. Maybe saying that's in evidence isn't necessarily the case. But there's no. We do have. I mean, we know about matter and energy, and we can describe them scientifically, and there are scientific models that can give you uh, an eternal universe. So there's no logical problem with any of this. Uh, to invoke, then there must be something else that can't be known about, that can only be known about through faith. Uh, it, I that's very different.
So what laws are there then that say
Matter and
that
energy
energy
cannot be
or
created or destroyed.
so you believe in an so there was no beginning to time?
There could be a beginning of time as a dimension of space, absolutely. But before that, did the universe exist? Sure.
So there's always been matter and energy in your opinion?
I don't see any logical problem with that.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Has God always existed?
I think so,
How does that work?
because he's eternal. That's his nature.
Okay, well that's just a tautological statement. You're not telling me how it works, you're just telling me what it is. Like, why is the sky blue? Because it's blue.
You did the same thing.
No, I didn't do that. So, do you have an explanation for
Maybe you said you just said it is what it is essentially.
When did I say that? With respect to what?
To energy and matter, you said it's eternal, and I asked you for
that
proof, and you
is
said,
right. So, matter and energy being conserved is in evidence. This isn't an argument. This is evidence. And then there are highly sophisticated mathematical, like physics, I guess we could call them models, that describe it. Now, you can call theoretical physics, I mean, I wouldn't call it faith. You can say it's not the same thing as empirical evidence, but it's predicated on empirical evidence. And theoretical physics has a long and storied history of us like finding empirics to support it, I would say. So no, I don't think these are equivalent at all. So how does God's eternality work? Eternality, that can't possibly be a word, can it?
eternalism.
It is a word. Eternality is a word. Huh. It just sounds so stupid. Anyways, how does that work?
No, I just do think they're, equal. If you believe that energy is eternal, what's stopping me from believing God is eternal?
But I know that energy exists. I don't think you or I know that a magical God exists.
Yeah, I think I do know though. So I guess.
How do you know that? In what evidence of that do you have?
I don't know. I feel like it's more concrete evidence than.
Well, then it should be pretty easy to give one example.
Well, I think Jesus is my example. He came and revealed God, and all throughout, different.
Okay, what evidence of that
before
do
he
you
came,
have?
Pointed to Jesus. And through his miracles, we got historical evidence of things that aren't physically
What evidence
possible,
do you have that the miracles happened?
"Quote unquote" magic, historical evidence, documentation, eyewitness accounts.
Chat, is it?
I don't know. I don't know what would be sufficient for you. I can't take you back.
If I told
you
a
movie of it 2,000 years ago.
If I told you that I know somebody that can really do magic, what evidence would convince you?
If I witnessed them do magic.
So, do you think that magic is real?
If somebody can come up to me and perform magic, then I would believe it's real, yeah.
Do you think that magic is real?
Right now, before anyone's done magic in front of me.
Yeah. Well, I assume you've seen magic tricks before. So you have
magic tricks.
You have an informed opinion on this.
But what are you asking? Whether I think
I'm asking you if you think that magic is real.
Actual magic.
Yeah.
I don't think magic is real. I
okay.
think it's just.
But you said if you saw somebody perform a magic trick, then you would believe it. Have you ever seen somebody perform a magic trick?
No, not a magic trick. If it was genuine, like, I don't know, like Doctor Strange, like they could warp, reality and stuff like that.
So if you saw somebody perform a magic trick, you would believe it.
It depends. If it's David Blaine, I'm gonna know that there's something going on, or there's something behind it, or like dynamo. Like,
would you know what's behind it?
If it's an actual wizard that can create a fireball,
would you know what's behind the magic trick if David Blaine was doing it? Do you know how he does any of his magic tricks?
No, they use clever deception.
Okay, no.
I mean, I've looked
So
them up and I've seen a few.
So so you and I watch David Blaine perform a magic trick, and I say, he really did, I don't know, make that elephant disappear. And you said, I'm pretty sure it's a magic trick. And I said, oh yeah? How did he do it? And you say, I don't know. Does that mean that I am right? Does that mean that I am more likely to be right than you are? Or what?
Well, sorry, I lost you a bit. So David Blaine's made an elephant disappear,
Yep. Now, according to
and
you, it's just a magic
fooled
trick.
by
You're
it.
sure of it. I say, no, the elephant really did cease to exist in the universe. And then you're like, no, it was just a trick. And then I say, oh yeah? How do you do it? You don't know how he did it. So does that mean I'm right? Does that mean that I am more likely to be right than you are? What is the status of our competing claims?
Oh, okay. So if you were fooled by it and I wasn't, what's to say who was right?
Yeah.
It would be if it was genuine magic. So whether the elephant actually did disappear or not.
That is
or not,
just
it was
begging the
a trick.
question. I'm
What
asking
do you
you
mean by that?
which one of us is more likely to be correct. What I'm really asking you is, you're saying that you don't think it's real, but you don't have an explanation for what actually happened. So does that mean that
Okay.
I am valid in saying, no, it really was magic?
Yeah, so in the hypothetical, if I don't know how it was done and I can't prove whether it was real magic or not, then it would be whether it was real magic would be who was more likely to be right or wrong. I wouldn't know. Yes, you just said
You're
I
still
don't know if
begging the
we're going in
question
loops.
hardcore. So what I'm trying to get at here is
Yeah, just go.
just because you're a skeptic in this case, just because you don't know how it happened doesn't mean that therefore I'm right. It also isn't evidence that I'm right, that real magic occurred, because we don't have evidence of real magic occurring, even if somebody does a trick right in front of our eyes. It's not evidence when the fact that people can't explain what happened isn't evidence that we really did violate the laws of physics or whatever and perform a real magic trick. So, what evidence of... So you said God's existence is evidence in the figure of Jesus and his miracles. What evidence of any of his miracles do we have?
I feel like plenty. Like he raised people from the dead.
That
He
happened?
rose from
What
the
evidence
dead.
of that happening do we have?
The biblical account of it happening. I mean,
Okay. How many stories of that type do you believe? Because there are thousands of them.
it depends if it's a parable or some metaphor. I'm gonna look at it that way, but I think there are genuine
So
stories in the
Horace
Bible
was
that are
raised
real.
from the dead. Do you think that that actually happened?
I don't know.
You don't know. Give me a percent of how likely you think it is to have taken place. I'll even let you use fractions.
50-50. You either did or didn't. Is that not fair?
What's not fair?
What I said, sorry.
Yeah, so what number would you put on it?
Oh, so I said 50-50. Like you either did or didn't. Like
That's your actual answer?
it's, you said probability, so I mean I can only pick that.
Okay. I either do or do not have $1 billion in my room. What are the odds that I do? 50-50? All I'd have
I
to
don't know
do
you,
is
man.
go
I doubt it.
all
I
I'd have
doubt
to
it.
go is all I'd have to do is go to my room about 10 times in a row, and then that would guarantee that during one of those visits there definitely would be money in my room, because those 50-50 odds would multiply every single time. So by the 10th time I go check, it's almost certain that it would have to be there, right? Because it can't not be there 10 times in a row. I don't know if that
I'm not sure that's how
statistical
probabilities
example
work.
actually is how that would work. But so,
I'm not sure about that one. You could try
so
it though.
would you say that the odds that there is money in my room is $1 billion in my room is 50-50?
No, I think yeah, that's a slightly different example. I just don't know about the case that you said before. Me just judging, like it
What
would be
is
very difficult to have
what is
$1 billion in your room.
qualitatively different than uh, a god with a bird for a head rising from the dead versus money in my room? Why is that one more
What?
likely to be true than the money in my room?
Why is it more likely?
Because you gave Horace a 50-50 shot. And you didn't give me a number for the money, but you basically said, no, there's no way.
Well, I'm taking the presumption that, you know, God and, supernatural beings exist, but not that you can have like a, fantasy invisible lottery going on your room so that when you enter, you might have $1 billion in your. I don't know.
Fantasy and invisible is exactly how I would describe any god that's ever been imagined. So this isn't productive. We got to talk about something else. So
Okay.
if God exists, then it wouldn't matter if the Bible had ever been written. Presumably, there would be some way to know that God exists. Do you have any idea in your mind of how we could do that?
Um, just hearing it, you know, he revealed himself in, I mean, you probably know the first story in the Bible. He was living with people as he created them in the beginning of time. Like he wasn't hidden. It's just like it was obvious to see him, like he was walking amongst people. So you'd hear the stories from
So if
the
God
beginning of time.
exists, then we could just go and see God.
Yeah, the first two people, and then I don't know if you know the creation story, but after Eve ate the apple, um, and Adam ate it as well, then they were separated with him. He wasn't able to be seen. Um, the people literally hid themselves in the trees when God was walking through the
Yeah,
Garden of
I
Eden.
know.
That's how it's written. Okay, so yeah, you know. So based off of that, if it was never written, you just know. People would it would be like a common knowledge thing.
But that's not the case, is it?
What do you mean?
Because even if the Bible had never been written, then you're saying, oh, people would just be able to go walk around with God. Okay, well, we don't have if that would be like if there was no book about zebras, then we could still find out zebras exist because we could go to Africa and look at zebras. Can we go
Yeah.
anywhere and look at God?
Well, he would be here if there was no sin. That's what I'm saying. In the creation story, that's what the premise is.
So you don't
That he
have
can't be with
evidence.
us.
You have maybe
Well,
if
if
history had unfolded
you're
differently,
saying a
then there would
hypothetical
be
where you
evidence. So you
you're
don't
saying a
have
hypothetical
evidence.
where you can't write the Bible, but I'm saying that's evidence. In your hypothetical, I'd have evidence as word of mouth because there would be no sin. There would be no need to have a Bible to correct our laws to get us right with God.
I wasn't
Does
asking
that
you
make
for
sense?
hypothetical evidence. Not really. I was asking you
You said it
for.
where the Bible doesn't exist. That's hypothetical. We have the Bible. You can read it right now. So
Yeah, but
technically it
the
is.
the hypothetical is the Bible not existing, but uh, the evidence would presumably still exist. That's not really hypothetical.
Why would you need evidence if you can see him
To
face to face?
to have a reason to think something. Yeah. So again, if you could see it face to face, can anybody see this face to face?
Yeah, Adam and Eve.
This is just painful. Okay.
You've got Moses. You've got Jesus. You know, people have seen God face to face.
I
There's loads of
asked you
examples.
I was asking you for how you could demonstrate that God exists even if the Bible didn't exist.
Yeah, and I said if the Bible didn't exist, it would be probably because that there was never a serpent in the Garden of Eden. There was never
So
Satan
God would
falling
just
from heaven.
exist and we could walk around. Okay, well, that's hypothetical. I can't really deal with hypothetical evidence.
Okay,
What evidence?
so what's the limit? So I'm not allowed a Bible to exist. What evidence am I allowed to use if there's no, if sin still exists and God doesn't
Literally
want to
anything you
communicate with
want.
us? So if God can't communicate with us through the only way that we pretty much communicate, it would have to be through sight, and you didn't allow me that. So I don't know what sensing you would just feel
Because
God.
that isn't evidence. That's you described evidence that we don't have, but that we could have if things were different. The only thing I'm asking you is different is the Bible doesn't exist. How is anybody supposed to know that God exists?
So did the historical accounts exist?
Do
That
they?
just
Yeah.
so just, but just not the Bible. The historical account of Jesus.
Oh man. Yeah, in this
It's
hypothetical, we don't
it seems
have that.
awkward. Okay, how would we know that God exists?
That's what I'm asking you.
I don't want to go back to the start, but through creation, through seeing things that exist.
And what evidence that the fact that things exist means God did it do we have?
Because God is eternal. It's an obvious
That's a
conclusion.
claim.
If you have an apple, you've got to have an apple tree. You know, if you've got life, you have to have something that brings life. If you have conscious thoughts, you've got to have something that gave you conscious thoughts. You
What
can't have
evidence do you
dust.
have that God did any of that?
What? Conscious thought.
What evidence do you have that God did any of that?
What? Have thoughts?
What evidence that God did any of that do you have?
Any of what? What are you specifically referencing?
The things that you said. In order to have life, you have to have a life giver. In order to have thoughts, you have to have a thought giver. What evidence that God did
The
any of that do
creation.
you
I've
have?
already said it.
That's
That's
just
why I thought we
begging the
moved on to
question.
create.
What evidence do you have? Okay. Maybe I can teach you why this is stupid. Do you see this bottle?
Okay,
Do you see this bottle?
I did.
Do
see
you
the
see the magical bottle genie?
I don't think there is one. I don't. I don't.
Okay,
I don't see
well,
one.
I can prove that you're wrong about, or that it does exist, because if bottles exist, that means that the magical bottle genie that creates bottles exists.
I think you're just strawmanning it now. I'm not saying that bottles are created by metal. I'm saying there's probably bottle manufacturers. That's
No,
logical,
there's a
no?
bottle. If I claim that the reason bottles exist is because there's a bottle genie, and therefore the bottle genie exists because bottles exist, that's begging the question. If you say God exists because there is creation and creation comes from God, therefore the existence of things is the evidence that God that creates things exists, you're going in a circle. You're begging the question. Come on,
I don't. I
George.
don't think it is. Yeah, I just don't think it is. Come on, George. Sorry.
So what evidence
Like, how
that
can you
God
have a
created the universe do you have?
what sort of power would it take in order to create the Big Bang? You'd need
I
something
have no
very
idea,
powerful.
and neither do you.
A lot, well, I think it's God.
Explain. How much energy did God use?
As much as it took.
Right.
I'm not going to
God
have,
did it. How did he do
measurements
it?
for
In
you.
the way he did it. You're not
Exactly.
explaining anything. This isn't evidence.
It
It's
won't be
almost an
possible for me to
argument, but
explain.
an
I've
argument
already
isn't
said this.
evidence.
I've already said this, bro. I'm not going to be able to explain how the mind of God works, am I? I'm a finite human who
Right.
lives
So
for
then
100 years. He's an eternal God who lives
so if you can't
forever.
explain anything, In what sense could you
I can
ever have
explain
evidence?
things. I can't explain the most probably like pivotal moment in all of creation sort of things.
Then why should I believe it?
Even if I was an Einstein level mathematician, I wouldn't be able to explain it.
George, then
Do you know
why
what I
should
mean?
I believe it?
Because there's solid evidence.
What evidence?
Like I said, with the Bible, with Jesus, with historical accounts, with using your eyes and your senses,
The fact that I can smell
practicing
things proves that God exists in what way?
the fact that you have logic and reason and can know,
No, you
as you've
said
already told me.
senses. So the fact that I can smell things prove God exists in
I,
what way?
I didn't say senses, but that, I
Yes,
mean,
you did
we
say
can,
senses. The word you
well,
specifically, the specific word you said was senses. So,
okay, I'm sorry if I said that, but we can still use that. Okay, so I won't backpedal. Okay, so you use your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your nose, and that's coordinated to your brain. You hear things, your senses, and you follow with logical conclusions.
yep,
Then
that's all
use all of your
biologically
senses.
explainable. Where does God enter the equation?
Yeah, your consciousness.
What is that?
It's your you know your it's like your innate lawgiver. Like you know things are wrong and right. Just be like
That's
I feel like it's common knowledge.
conscience, not consciousness.
It stems from the same thing.
Why is a
You are
conscience
aware
evidence of God?
of your conscious because he writes the law. So if we all know and all have an objective,
What
feeling
evidence
of
of
right
that
and
is
wrong,
there?
whether it's well, we have a law system. We have people that have visceral reactions to, heinous crimes, bombings, terrorist acts. I feel like that's sufficient evidence to know that we can have reactions and feelings and sense things are right and wrong.
Why would
So we
that
have
not be biologically innate?
it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to not be, but the thing is,
Okay,
that's still
so this
consciousness.
isn't
That's what we've defined it
evidence.
as.
So this could be evidence of God, or it could be evidence of something that is biologically innate. Now, how do we tell the difference?
Because we have different positions on who created the universe and how it started. That's the
No, the
only thing
question was, how could we tell the difference?
between whether consciousness is biological or
Are our innate moral instincts biological instincts and therefore have a naturalistic explanation, or do they come from God? How do we tell the difference?
they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And I mean, there could be a difference, but then again, it's just up to the way that God's decided it. We could have naturally evolved with a biological conscience to have grown and improved over time as we ironed it out. That could be explained in a natural way. It also could have
So
been
you've
explained that God
described a
started
world.
that process.
So in your explanation here, the world where God exists and the world where God doesn't exist are not distinguishable from each other.
So, what do you mean they're not distinguishable?
You said, oh, it could be biological, but a really long time ago, God just pushed the very first domino, and that's how things ended up the way they are. So, in other
Yeah,
words,
it could be that way.
in
It could be.
both of these worlds, there's no evidence that God did it.
No, it could not be that way as well. It could be that he continues to intervene. I'm not saying it's either or. I'm
So,
still remaining in my position.
what
I don't know the mind
evidence?
of God.
What evidence that God has anything to do with it do you have?
Just that we're not like other animals.
In
We're
what
not the
way?
same in terms of in this aspect of consciousness and morality and conscience.
Why is that the trait that would determine that God exists?
I'm not saying that's the pivotal trait. I'm just saying that's one of them because you said on this premise, what would determine this? I'd say, well, animals they just do things based off of instinct
Do you know
and
that other animals,
desire.
well, yeah, but you literally conceded that it might be the case that human moral instincts are just biological, which means they are just instincts as well. Are you aware that there are other
Sure.
animals that have an intrinsic sense of fairness?
Yeah, but it wouldn't be elevated to the human level.
Why would it doesn't matter?
They can have awareness.
Humans are strong, but they're not as strong as gorillas. Therefore, God must be a gorilla god because uh, it would have to rise to the level of gorilla strength.
No, I don't think that follows.
Uh, yeah, I know you are correct. Now, use that same logic for what you're talking about. Other animals have an innate
Well, I believe God
biological
is moral.
trait. We have a different and more highly developed version of that trait, therefore, God. Nope.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but because, yeah, of what I believe in the Bible, this I'm trying to be as honest as possible. Um, I believe God is a lawgiver. It's just in his nature, it's part of what he is. So, no, I don't have specific evidence in that aspect that would prove it to you, but I don't think there is going to be solid evidence I can give you. It is a faith-based religion. I've seen things that I wouldn't have been able to explain,
As
magic
long as
tricks
you
that you
admit
would
it.
call, yeah. But I'm not, um, afraid to say that. I still think it's worth you researching, though. I still think it's worth you finding more things that will convince you of my position, because you have good arguments, but I'm not going to say you argue in bad faith, because I don't think you do. I think you've got good points. Um, you shut down a couple of my arguments, and I think that's fine because I'm not a debater. So, um, but yeah, I think I've taken up loads of time.